Our club has always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas. Here, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public personalities.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. It's a delight, again, to welcome a live audience back at the Canadian Club. As I said earlier, this is our second in-person event of our 2022 season, the 125th anniversary season as well. We're aware that there are hundreds online joining us virtually as well. Thank you for joining us online. As you watch today's event, please engage with us on social media. Hashtags are on your tables and on your screens. After his address today, the Minister will be joined by Tanya Van Biesen, Director of the Canadian Club Board and Senior Vice President, Global Corporate Engagement at Catalyst, for a moderated discussion and question and answer period. For those of you here in the room with us, please locate the Q&A cards on your table, jot down your hard-hitting questions for the Minister, and we'll collect them after to have them answered. For those joining remotely, please just hit the Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen at the appropriate time during today's event. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge today's sponsors. EDF Renewables, represented today by Corey Basil, and Intact Financial Corporation, represented by Carla Smith. We appreciate your generous support. At this time, I'd like to invite Carla Smith, Executive Vice President and Chief People, Strategy and Climate Officer from Intact Financial Corporation, to introduce today's special guest.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to be here today on behalf of Intact, and many thanks to the Canadian Club Toronto for organizing today's event. I'm also conscious that it must be an incredibly busy time in government right now, and so I feel very privileged that we have with us today the Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of the Environment and Climate Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. At Intact, our purpose is to help individuals, businesses, and society prosper in good times and be resilient in bad times. We've been on the front lines of climate change for decades. As a property and casualty insurer, this is an issue that is existential for us and our entire industry. Having personally worked through the Kelowna forest fires of 2003, I remember thinking that I would not likely see another event of that magnitude and devastation in my career. Sadly, I was wrong. Canada is warming at double the pace of the global average, and so with it is the suffering caused by fires, floods, and extreme heat. And it's with the desire to reduce that suffering that we've invested in the Intact Centre for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. But there is a silver lining. Perhaps one of the most important lessons that we have learned along the way is to not only see climate change as a threat, By evolving our business, we have found opportunities and have come to believe that we can help society fight climate change while also winning as a business. The stage is perfectly set. We have an existential crisis, and our government has set for us targets for 2030 that we can be proud of. So now we just have to execute. That's easier said than done, and of course we all have a role to play. Throughout history, as the world has changed, private industry has risen to the occasion and brought innovation to solve significant challenges, and climate change should be no different. From government, we need help to create the conditions that will mobilize capital and unlock the entrepreneurial energy that Canada has to offer. In particular, we need them to set the priorities and concentrate our efforts. With that in mind, as co-chair of the Business Council of Canada's Working Group on Climate Change and Energy Transition, we were pleased to submit recently to government some high-impact items that could be incorporated into Canada's 2030 emissions reduction plan, which I know we're all here to hear about today. And so with that, I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for today, a leading figure in the fight against climate change. Minister Guilbeault's commitment to the environment, as we've heard today, began at a very early age. He has spent his career as an activist and strategic advisor to governments and businesses, both in Canada and abroad. Before his transition to government, the minister amassed an impressive resume of climate experience and leadership across NGOs and the private sector, including co-founding Équiterre, Quebec's largest environmental organization, and working as a director and campaign manager for Greenpeace. He was first elected in 2019. He served as Minister of Canadian Heritage, and in 2021, he was appointed Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Minister Guilbeault's lifelong commitment to these issues, his wealth of experience, his passion, and his domain knowledge make him incredibly well-suited to the mandate before him, and they make us lucky as a country to have him at the helm of this file. So it is truly an honor to have him here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the Honourable Stephen Guilbeault.
Thank you very much, Carla, for this kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. I want to thank the organizers at the Canadian Club for inviting me to speak today. And thank you all for joining me. Je tiens à remercier les organisateurs et organisatrices du Canadian Club de m'avoir invité ici aujourd'hui. Et je vous remercie également, vous toutes et tous, d'être ici. I see former cabinet ministers, my friend Navdeed Bains and Lisa Raitt are here today. So there is life after politics. That's good to know. I would like to also to salute my friend and colleague, Member of Parliament for Toronto Danforth, Julie de Brussen. It feels good to attend an event in person. Wow. And it's always good to be in Toronto. Some people know me as the guy who climbed the CN Tower. It's true, I did it. To call to attention Canadian climate ambition under the Kyoto Protocol. It was over 20 years ago, and thankfully my days having to climb the tallest structure in Canada to draw attention to climate change are over. Although being in elected office remains a bit of a high-wire act. Many of you have probably seen the environmental satire, Don't Look Up. Well, since I climbed the CN Tower, my motto is, don't look down. But more seriously, as a society, we have moved beyond the need to convince people that climate change is real. People can see it with their own eyes. And we're beyond wondering if climate change might change the way we live. It already has. At November's United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, we move well past discussions about why we should take ambitious actions. The science has long been clear on the cause. It's carbon pollution. Each year, the world emits 47 million tons, that's megatons for the geeks in you, of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Those emissions will remain there anywhere from a few years to a few thousand years. They are heating our climate at a rapid rate. We know this to be true. Extreme weather events we only used to see once every 100 years now happen regularly, as Carla was talking about earlier. In Canada, damage from extreme weather events has cost the economy around $31 billion in the last 40 years. Many urban cities like Toronto have a high concentration of concrete building and roads and aren't equipped with drainage system that can handle heavy rainfalls or flash floods. One Toronto flooding event in 2018 cost over $80 million. It's costing our health too. Heat-related deaths and health issues from pollution are being recorded more frequently in Canada and all over the world. Governments everywhere are acknowledging the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to do so rapidly. Canada has its own ambitious target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by the year 2030 and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Canadians want to be part of our national effort to fight climate change, certainly something I've heard at the door time and time again over the last 2 years. They are taking daily actions as individuals and as members of local communities. They are looking to be part of the solution. Consumers are increasingly concerned about how much recycled content is in a product or what product's carbon footprint is. Look around across all economic sectors, in all segments of society. People are already shifting from asking why they should care about the environment to how, at this pivotal moment in history, they can make a difference. My activist past is well known. Greenpeace, Équiterre. I have been active in the environmental sphere all of my adult life. What you might not know about my history, well, I guess you got a bit of an update earlier, but is that for 10 years I also worked as an advisor for firms such as Deloitte and a Canadian venture capital fund specializing in climate-friendly and sustainable technologies. Having seen it from all sides, I understand the value of building bridges and partnerships. Today I'm speaking to you as the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. I represent a government that sees that the environment and the economy go together, hand in hand. This is not a phrase we simply made up because we thought it would sell environmental protection to Bay Street investors. In every facet of society, there is a recognition that the clean future is the only future, and that a clean economy presents great opportunities for those who are ready to take the reins. By 2025, clean tech's contribution to Canada's GDP is expected to grow to $80 billion from $26 billion in 2016. And this year, global clean technology activity is expected to exceed $2.5 trillion. Markets are already acting. Smart money is going towards forward-thinking actors. We've reached a point where investors, business people, producers, consumers have the smarts, the desire, and the plan to turn this global environmental challenge into our economic advantage. This is our window of opportunity to act. All of us here, government, industry, Indigenous peoples, and civil society, can act together to create the conditions we need for success with clear market and policy signals that will help mobilize capital and labor toward a truly sustainable economy. Frankly, we are a bit behind the curve. Our top competitors in the US, Europe, and other countries are also moving in that direction, and they're moving fast. Many industrial sectors are finding ways to do businesses cleaner with few emissions. New industries are popping up to satisfy the public's demand for cleaner goods and services. To varying degrees, governments are backing and rewarding those forward-thinking market actors. There is a market evolution taking place, and Canada has the choice now to lead or to be left behind. Or, to present this argument as a counterfactual, does anyone really believe, with conflict in Europe reshaping global energy supply chains, with devastating extreme weather events like the BC floods and landslides, with Canada warming at twice the global average, does anyone really believe we can simply continue with business as usual? So I've talked about why we need to act, because the cost of doing otherwise is too high, because the opportunities we'll miss out if we don't lead are too great. Now let's talk about the path forward on building a healthy economy and healthy environment. At the end of this month, the Government of Canada will table the first ever emission reduction plan under the recently passed net zero legislation. This will not be some grand monument carved in stone, a table from the mount. Rather, it will be the first critical installment of an ongoing legislated requirement to present such a plan in Parliament with each milestone target, no matter which party is in power. This emission reduction plan will provide us with a roadmap toward our goal to cut emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. That may sound daunting, but let me tell you why I know we can't get there. Our plan will highlight the opportunities for innovation and investment to make the required reductions across the economy. In transportation, we're working closely with the automotive sector to transition to a market where 100% of new cars sold in Canada are zero emission by 2035. The US, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and others are also moving aggressively on zero-emission vehicle deployment. Companies such as Ford, Stellantis, and GM have already announced plans for an electric future. Countries such as Norway and Sweden, states such as California, and provinces such as BC and Quebec are progressing quickly on this front. The barriers we used to have with electric cars are quickly disappearing. For example, their price. Electric vehicles are expected to match gas-powered models in price within 3 to 4 years. And not only that, we've rolled out a program to make them more affordable for Canadians, something more than 125,000 Canadians have already taken advantage of. Their driving range, battery technology is improving exponentially. And since 2015, we've invested an historic $1 billion to make EVs more affordable and chargers more accessible for Canadians. These investments in charging infrastructure made so far will result in more than 25,000 new chargers coast to coast. Electric cars aren't limited to small cars now. You can order a fully electric pickup truck, such as the ever so popular Ford F-150, which is expected to be launched later this year. It's no wonder electric cars are breaking sales records around the world. Global sales of electric cars more than doubled in 2021 despite supply chain challenges. As many electric cars are now sold in a space of a week as in the whole year of 2012. With transportation sector being the second largest emitter in Canada, the source of roughly a quarter of our greenhouse gas emissions, electrifying new vehicles will go a long way. But part and parcel to an electric fleet of vehicles is clean sources of electricity. Our country already enjoys one of the cleanest energy grids in the world, with over 80% of electricity Canadian use coming from non-emitting sources such as hydro and wind. Getting to 100% clean electricity grid will not only mean clean air, but significant business opportunities in clean energy and clean tech investments. We're already making progress on reducing emissions by phasing out coal-generated electricity. We're doing it while ensuring a just transition to sustainable jobs for coal workers and their communities. And some businesses are already riding the wave of technological innovation to make clean power not only a reality, but an attractive investment opportunity. I was especially excited to see the Travers Solar Project in Alberta, which will see more than 3,000 acres of land transformed with 1.3 million solar panels. Or the Oneida Energy Storage Project, the largest battery storage energy project in the world, right here in Ontario's Haldimand County. In a recent report outlining its priority to achieve net zero goals, the Business Council of Canada identified an expansion of the low-carbon electricity grid as its #2 recommendation. Using clean electricity to power our transportation sector, heat our buildings, and generate our manufacturing and industrial processes is widely recognized as a key pathway to achieve net zero economy by mid-century. Of course, creating a clean economy also means integrating the power of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. We have a strong AI advantage in Canada we can put to use to decarbonize, including with precision agriculture and integration into vehicle manufacturing. We know partnerships will be key between all levels of governments, across economic sectors and communities. The proposed Atlantic Loop is an exciting example of cross-provincial and federal collaboration. It would bring hydroelectric power from Quebec and Labrador to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. These are ambitious but achievable national projects. Heavy emitting industry are the first ones to tell you that they recognize achieving net zero emissions is the way to the future. From oil and gas manufacturing, companies are investing in clean tech innovation. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies represent a major opportunity to capture emissions before they are released into the atmosphere from industries. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies compress captured carbon into solid form and either store them back deep underground or repurpose them into entirely new products. Take, for example, the cement plant CO2 Ment in Richmond, BC. The company uses what's called a capture unit to pipe airborne pollution through a rotating set of filters that screen out carbon from the air and reuses it in CO2-cured concrete, storing emissions permanently. Canada is among the global leader in the startup carbon capture utilization industry. We are fourth in the number of CCUS patents granted behind the US, China, and the European Union. And while this technology is still only at its infancy, it is employing thousands of Canadians. In agriculture, there are transformative new technologies to make biogas out of farm waste and manure, and digital technologies that farmers use more and more to precisely measure and apply fertilizers to their crop. In 2019, Maple Leaf Foods became the world's first major carbon-neutral food company and just one of the 3 animal protein companies in the world to set science-based targets that align with the Paris Agreement. These innovations and opportunities are just a beginning. They show you it pays to think about climate actions and the economic opportunities that accompany them. Markets in Canada and around the world are moving this way. Consumers are moving this way. Businesses are being empowered to move this way. As RBC reports, it has never been easier to access capital for green projects. Canadian firms raised $38 billion in green financing from 2010 to 2020, a pace that will only increase as the push to reach our 2030 emissions target intensifies. As a government, our goal is to create the conditions for market success while meeting our emissions reductions goals. Or in other words, our focus is on a healthy economy and a healthy environment. Since 2016, the federal government has committed more than $100 billion to climate action and environmental protection, a record in our history. But governments alone cannot finance the transition to a clean growth. Continued and enhanced private sector investment and a strong and dynamic sustainable finance market are essential to long-term success. Just a few days ago, my colleague, Minister Freeland, and I released Canada's framework around the issuance of federal green bonds. Green bonds give investors the opportunity to support Canada's climate and environmental measures while taking advantage of emerging market opportunities. They are an important part of the Government of Canada's economic approach to support the country's transition to net zero. These bonds will provide safe and secure opportunities for investors to grow their portfolio of climate-friendly products. In May 2021, Canada launched a Sustainable Finance Action Council to bring together public and private sector financial expertise. The Council supports the growth of a strong, well-functioning Canadian sustainable financial market. 6 of Canada's largest banks have already joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance under the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero umbrella. Chaired by former Bank of Canada and Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, the alliance is comprised of 450 leading financial institutions across 45 countries. It accounts for over 130 trillions in asset under management. Canada now joins a number of other countries, Canadian provinces and corporations in establishing a green bond framework to guide our new green bond program and further promote the sustainable finance market. The government is targeting an inaugural $5 billion insurance in the coming weeks. These steps are a crucial part of our strategy to mobilize capital toward a truly sustainable economy. They support government investment in green infrastructure, wind and solar energy, nature conservation, and other environmental initiatives. And as you know, the global climate change represents a massive opportunity. The time has come to build a cleaner, more durable, and more inclusive economy. The world will invest trillions of dollars in the clean economy over the coming decade alone. Some of the world's largest asset managers, such as BlackRock, HSBC, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec are already taking serious action to combat climate change. The International Energy Agency has estimated that up to 50% of the technologies needed to achieve net zero by 2050 are currently only at an early stage development. That's why ongoing legislated emission reduction plan, a roadmap, is so important. It helps us navigate the opportunities and obstacles ahead. As more countries commit to achieve net zero, the demand for net zero emission technologies will grow. Canadian innovators already receive international recognition for their leadership. 13 Canadian companies were named to the 2022 edition of the Global Cleantech 100 list, a prestigious collection of the most innovative and promising private sector clean tech companies from around the world. This year, as in 2021, Canada had more companies on that list than any other country except the US. But we need to go further. And in doing so, our actions must also be inclusive. According to research from McKinsey Global Institute, if women's participation in the economy was the same as men's, they could add as much as $28 trillion to the annual global GDP in 2025. In Budget 2021, we included measures to improve the economic participation of women and underrepresented groups, including $33 million over 3 years to support the 50-30 challenge, a call to action to businesses across Canada to increase diverse representation on corporate boards and in senior management. Our actions must also include gender equality and diverse representation. Before I wrap up, I want to touch on the situation in Ukraine. Canada strongly condemns President Putin's unjustifiable and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies to support Ukrainians that are under brutal attack by President Putin and to uphold the rules-based international order. Global oil prices are soaring as a result of this conflict, and the issue of energy security in Europe is center stage. In light of Russia's aggressions towards Ukraine, we are actively assessing what further measures we may take with our partners. Everything is on the table. But what are allies telling us? At a recent International Energy Summit, European nations reacted to the crisis with an overwhelming desire to accelerate their transition away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy sources. That is where Canada can help. As the President of the European Commission stated earlier this month, and I quote, "It is our switch to renewables and hydrogen that will make us truly independent. Every kilowatt hour of electricity Europe generates from solar, wind, hydropower, or biomass reduces our dependency on Russian gas and other energy sources." Canada is uniquely positioned to help Europe and the world secure this new clean economy. We're already leaders in non-emitting technologies and have the raw resources required to build them, including critical minerals. We're one of the top 10 hydrogen producers in the world and can be a major exporter of hydrogen technologies. Canada can be an engine for the clean growth needed by Europe and the world. La transition vers un avenir propre est imminente. Tous les signes sont là. Les changements climatiques modifieront-ils notre façon de vivre, de travailler, de penser? C'est déjà le cas. Aujourd'hui, il existe un large consensus sur le fait que les changements climatiques sont réels et que la transition vers un avenir durable et propre est déjà en cours. A transition to a clean future is imminent. All the signals are there. Will climate change alter the way we live, work, and think? It already has. Today, there is widespread consensus that climate change is real, that the transition to a sustainable, clean future is already underway. The emission reduction plan the government will be tabling will give predictability to industries and investors. It is ambitious, but coming at it from all angles, as I just said, it is achievable. It will pave the way for Canadians to work together to overcome the greatest challenge of our generation. It's time we recognize that there can be no economy without the environment. It's time we meet the future that is already here. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister. Oh, my mic is now on. I was told at the table it was on, but that nobody could hear me. I'm not sure that's true, but So I do encourage you to share your questions. There will be someone circulating to pick them up. I've got a few already, but please keep them coming. So thank you for the information that you just shared. You've got a big file. I read your mandate letter, and it's big, long, meaty.
It's been rumored to be one of the longest.
Scary. Okay, so there are so many different ways and things that need to go right in order for us to reduce our emissions, or to reach the targets, the emission reductions. What if something doesn't go right?
The plan I will be tabling in Parliament at the end of the month will present a picture of how we think we can get there and show the contribution of different sectors of Canada's economy to reaching our 2030 targets. But we have contingency plans, obviously. We know that some measures may work better than others. And we have still 8 years in front of us, 8 more federal budget, new technologies to be introduced, new projects to come online. So it is ambitious, but we think it is achievable.
You do think it is achievable?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and I'm encouraged by that. I think all Canadians would be encouraged by that. But yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that the government's plan to cut greenhouse gas emissions from the oil and gas sector, that piece will be delayed. That won't be part of the plan that you will be tabling.
What the Prime Minister said during the last election campaign, we made a series of engagement, including the promise to put in place a cap on the emission of the oil and gas sector. What we've said to provinces, territories, the industry, and other stakeholders is that it will likely take about a year to develop that regulation, which is actually not unusual. My colleagues from the Department of Environment and Climate Change would tell you that it's a bit ambitious, actually, to do that in a year. So it was always known that part of our plan would not be in the emission reduction plan, which doesn't mean like there won't be a hole in our plan, and the cap will come, but the emission reduction plan will show where we think different sectors need to be in 2030. So these will not be targets for each of the sectors, but objectives we feel different sectors need to achieve.
So you said it won't leave a hole, and yet some perceive it will leave a pretty substantial hole. So how do we think about the plan in light of the fact that sector will not be included in the? Oh no, the sector will definitely be included. Okay. Like the oil and gas sector will be included. There's a couple of measures which we're still in process of defining, and since we had a legislative obligation to table the emission reduction plan, those measures are not necessarily defined as of yet, but this is the first emission reduction plan, but it's not the last. And we will need to publish an update in 2023, in 2025, so people will be able to see the evolution of our plan moving forward. And these new elements, these new regulations will be included in the upcoming updates. Great. We have a question from the audience on this specific topic, and I think you've answered the first. What is the timeline for the OSN's emissions cap? So it sounds like it's about a year.
Well, the end of the year, beginning of 2023. Okay. That's the goal.
This individual also asked, how will the cap be designed, and how, if at all, are emerging global energy security and affordability considerations being incorporated into the cap?
The design is something we're hard at work on right now within the government, within different ministries, but also we're consulting provinces, we're consulting the industry, experts, environmental organizations, and indigenous organizations. So the short answer is I don't know. And the long answer would also be I don't know what the design will be, because we're really still trying to figure out what is the best path to do this, and certainly very eager to hear the suggestions and proposals from stakeholders. I think on affordability, I mean, it's important to note that we've had carbon pricing in Canada since 2018. We didn't see gas price at the pump jump when carbon pricing came into force in 2018 or 2019 or 2020 or 2021. What we're seeing now is a result of what's happening in Ukraine, largely, and supply chain issues related to COVID. And people should remember that 8 out of 10 families in provinces where the federal carbon pricing system is being applied receive more money from carbon pricing than if the program wasn't there. So on average, a household in Ontario will receive $600, and it goes up to almost $1,000 per year in Alberta, depending on the intensity of the province emissions portfolio. So that being said, we are very mindful of what inflation and what we're seeing, and certainly the recent rapid increase in energy prices, as well as wheat and other goods. And we are working closely with our international allies to try and find solutions to these challenges.
So, because you brought it up, April 1 carbon tax, yes or no?
Oh, we're not moving back on our climate change commitment. And as I said, I mean, except for the richest among us, people are better off with carbon pricing. They receive more money than if it wasn't there.
One of the things I'm interested in is how do we unify the country around, I mean, you made a very compelling case for why we all need to, why this is truly an emergency. But how do we unify the country around that? Because it's not clear to me that all parts of Canada, all people in Canada would agree with you.
You know, in 2016, I was on stage with then Premier Notley in Alberta when she introduced her climate leadership plan. And I was there because she invited me, but because I thought I should stand there as an environmentalist with her because I believed in what she was trying to do. And there was a lot of support for that. And I think there is a lot of support across the country for climate action. And if you look at the House of Commons, the majority of party represented in the House of Commons, the majority of MPs sitting in the House of Commons agree that we need to move forward on climate action. And there's one party which sometimes believes in climate change, sometimes doesn't, sometimes believes in climate action, sometimes doesn't, sometimes believes in carbon pricing, sometimes doesn't, that is still trying to figure it out. But for the most part, everyone's pretty much on board.
Okay. Ukraine is on everybody's mind. And we've got a couple of questions actually related to Ukraine. But the first one I want to ask you is, how, with the US's move yesterday, how are we going to respond to the immediate need for Europeans to access fossil fuels? How are we, Canada, going to respond?
So we are, mostly my friend and colleague, Minister Wilkinson at Natural Resources, is in close contact with our European colleagues on this. There is an International Energy Agency meeting, I think it's next week or the following week in Paris, which he will be attending. And we want to do everything we want to help. We also have to be realistic. We could increase probably our exports of crude oil to the US by 200,000 barrels a day, which in theory could allow the US to export 200,000 barrels a day more to Europe, where their needs is around 3 million barrels a day. That's what they receive from Russia. TMX will be completed, if all goes well, at the end of 2023, maybe 2024. Yeah. Just so happen it's going in the wrong direction, but theoretically, some oil could be shipped from the West Coast to Europe, with the caveat that European refineries aren't really equipped to handle our Canadian heavy crude. Making the investment to do that would be costly on their part, and they will have access to other sources of oil that they can more easily refine. So the most likely scenario was that TMX, which was initially designed for the Asian market, will continue going to the Asian market. There's an LNG project on the coast of BC being built. We're there in terms of completion. We're more looking at a maybe 2-3 years timeline before it's completed. So in the short term, we can do a little bit when it comes to oil and gas. But we can do a lot of things on clean technology. We can do hydrogen quickly. We can export technologies, and that we can do quickly.
Imagine that I'm in Calgary. You talked about a healthy economy, healthy environment. How are we balancing, and how are you working with your fellow members of Parliament to balance out what is our legacy energy sector with these climate, these environmental changes we need to make?
I think unless we work with the sector to transition to a low carbon economy and a low carbon sector, the sector is in a very dire situation. I mean, we've seen over the last few years roughly $30 to $40 billion leave the oil sands. And when you talk to investors, as I've done, it's not because they don't like the people of Alberta, but it's because of the greenhouse gas emissions and the investment risk of continuing to invest in a very high carbon oil. So we need to work with the industry to change that if we want to attract investment. And I think that's what we're doing. In fact, just yesterday, Minister Champagne, Wilkinson, and myself we're meeting with a group of oil executives, oil sands executives that have created an initiative called the Pathway Initiative. They're all working together, pulling resources to see how they can get to dramatically reduce the emissions of the oil sand sectors. That was my second meeting with them, and I've been minister now for 4 months. So we're actively working with the sector to see how we can achieve this.
And the response?
So my first trip as minister, 4 days into the job, was to the Glasgow conference. Then I came here to Toronto, and then I went to Calgary, and I did not meet anyone from the industry that said, we don't want to work with you on this. Everyone said, what can we do? Let's work together. Let's find solutions together. Let's build this new economy together. Every single person I met. I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about the private sector.
Right, right. And your meetings were not carefully positioned so that you didn't meet any of the...
Oil executives, independent power producers, Board of Trade. So we didn't handpick. We did not do that. I don't think it'd be fair or genuine or honest to do that anyway.
A question from the audience here. Will we be hearing more about investment in climate change impact mitigation?
Well, you'll be hearing more about all things climate change, for sure, including that. Yes, absolutely.
And can you share a little bit of your thinking?
Well, the emissions plan that I will be tabling, I mean, we'll look at what needs to happen in different sectors. It will also look at all of the things we've done. We've deployed, or we're in the process of deploying, about 100 measures since 2015, $100 billion in investment, but also looking at what are some of the things that need to happen? What are some of the sectors where we need to do more work than we've done so far? I can't disclose what will be in the report, but there'll be lots of material.
Okay. Maybe one final question, Minister. Many would say that Canada missed the boat on nuclear, that we had a competitive advantage that we missed, and that has now passed us by. How is Canada going to win with the technologies you described in your speech? How are we going to win in this reimagining of climate and the environment and energy sources?
I think as government, we have to look at all non-emitting technologies. And we're supporting the development of many, not all, but many of these technologies. Should it be at Natural Resource Canada or Innovation? There's a lot of programs to support the development of technologies. In the end, markets will decide which technologies will make it or not. Are these technologies performant enough from a energy production point of view, from a price point of view? And I mean, clearly, when you look at solar and wind, I mean, we're producing wind energy in Alberta for 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That's half of what I pay in Quebec, in what is one of the lowest jurisdiction in terms of electricity pricing. And we're seeing, I mean, not for solar, the price is a little bit higher in Canada, but when you look at around the world, what some of the prices we're seeing in the south of the U.S., in Chile, in other places in the world, I mean, we're producing solar energy for 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So, but if other technologies can perform from that point of view, then let's do it.
Do we have the right funding, infrastructure to support these emerging technologies and the people behind them?
Well, my years as an advisor to a venture capital fund showed me that there are things we do really well in Canada, and there are things where we're pretty good when funding research. We're pretty good at helping startups, but there is some missing links in the chain where we need to do better. That valley of death for entrepreneurs, where you go from pilot projects to pilot projects and you're never really able to take off as a small company. And I think government can play a very important role in terms of procurement. I mean, we buy 40% of the cement that's used in Canada. Imagine we start putting in our procurement requirement something about low carbon cement, or what is true of cement could be true of. I mean, I'm the first minister to have a service vehicle that is 100% EV. There are 6 charging stations on our national Capitol Hill. That's not, and they're not fast charging stations. So we have to get our own house in order. We have a lot of work to do as a federal government itself, both in terms of leading by example on the one hand, but also making sure that we can bring in these new companies and help them create a market in Canada, and then it's much easier to do that and then go abroad than the other way around. So
I'll end on this. If you had to give, this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If you had to give a report card to your the other ministries that you need to be partnering with to make this a success, are you out ahead on your aspirations and plans for climate relative to all those other things, avoiding the valley of death, all these other things that have to happen, or to what extent are we in sync?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, a number of ministers were less involved with having to deal with COVID on a day-to-day basis. And the Prime Minister asked, at the time, Infrastructure Minister Catherine McKenna, Jonathan Wilkinson, who was at Environment in those days, and me at Heritage, to start looking at what we would do after the pandemic. How do we rebuild? And what does our recovery plan look like? And the Prime Minister basically asked us, can we make this a green recovery plan? And so the three of us started working very informally. It wasn't even a formal cabinet committee, and eventually, someone else said, hey, I want to be part of this group. And by the end of it, there was about half of cabinet was part of our informal working group, which led to what became the Enhanced Climate Plan, which was presented at the end of 2021, where we made a commitment to not only continue but increase carbon pricing to $170 in 2030, deploy a number of other measures, and it is all hands on deck. It is. Every member of cabinet has in its mandate letter climate change as something they need to be part of, and the Prime Minister reminds all of my cabinet colleagues of that all the time. So we are working together like never before as a government, and we are trying to break those silos that you would have seen in the past. I'm not saying it's perfect; it's a work in progress, but it's happening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Dan is coming back.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying thank you to Tanya for moderating that Q&A, making it look so easy. That was fantastic. Thank you, Minister. We appreciate your remarks today and you choosing the Canadian Club of Toronto to be your podium here in Toronto. Certainly, I think quite clearly we heard from you that the transition is imminent. But I think we appreciated most the reality check that it's not just about government policy that will drive that transition. It's business leadership in moving towards more resiliency. It's market forces that are moving towards renewable power. And that there is so much more that Canadians in their individual lives can do and that our business community across the country needs to contribute. So thank you very much for those remarks. We look forward to your emissions reduction plan, and we appreciate the teaser here today. Thank you. Before we close, I'd like to extend another round of thanks and applause for today's event sponsors, Intact Financial Corporation and EDF Renewables. Let me take the opportunity while I have it to invite you to join online tomorrow for a panel discussion on building Canada's net zero workforce. It will be a strong and important conversation with Linda Hassenfras, CEO of Linamar, John Kousinioris, CEO of TransAlta, and Chief Charlene Gale, in conversation with RBC's John Stackhouse. I also will take the opportunity to plug another upcoming event that has yet to be announced, so a special teaser for you here today. On March 30th, we'll be joined by the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Stephen Del Duca, for a speech to the Canadian Club in advance of the Ontario provincial election in June. Let me conclude by thanking our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications, livemeeting.ca, for making it possible for members to join us virtually. Thank you once again for joining us in person today. Take care and stay safe.